All right, so let's do some live sketching. Let me first explain what I've got set up here. This is my watercolor lap setup. I literally use this on my lap. I'm sitting at my computer desk right now. This is a piece of board. You can check the info on the screen for exactly which kind of board it is. I can't remember off the top of my head. This is a butcher's tray full of watercolors. I have some paper towel right here. And the only thing you can't see that's off screen is my water container, which is just a little plastic old measuring cup filled with water. I'll just put that over here. And I have a HB pencil that I'll do my initial lay-in with. And I've got a Raphael round synthetic hair brush. It's a very soft brush. And I'll just use that one brush for the painting. I also have some markers, which I have right here. Just some of these are this German brand called Karstadt Fineliner. They're just these fine little markers. I may use these a little later. The subject is none other than Mr. Samuel L. Jackson of Pulp Fiction, in this case, a frame from the movie Pulp Fiction. And let's go ahead and start this. So I'm going to be using all the stuff that I talked about in chapter 1 and 2. And with a caricature, you have to exaggerate. So I'm looking at Sam Jackson here, and I notice that famously his eyes, caricature artists love to push the distance between his eyes. So I'll start by getting in some kind of relationship of the two eyes, and I'll push those way further than one eye width. The underhang plane, where the brow, this is the plane of the brow. I'll map that out in this nice arcing kind of graceful line. I know the glabella is somewhere in here. And his nose has a very narrow ridge in real life, so I will even further narrow it out and then go in and just get this plane. We're seeing him from below, so I'm going to get this underplane here of the nose. I'm just going to block that in very simply. I'm not thinking too much about the nostrils or anything like that. I'm just thinking about these, remember that S-curvy rhythm of the underplane of the nose? I'll just block that out and maybe just indicate a little bit as to where the wing of the nose is, because that rhythm will help me come down for the muzzle, and in this case will help me find his goatee, which really connects with that rhythm from the nasolabial furrow down to the goatee. His goatee goes way down here, so I'll just throw some lines down, but I need to keep capturing some of the structure of the head before I go forward. Let's get his irises in, just because I find that the character of what you're drawing really comes through when you put, the iris in. Like it just brings the character to life a little bit, because you can see where they're looking. Something as simple as that. I can't really see the glabella in the reference. I know it's there, but I'm not fixated on it. But it will help me kind of trace my way to the brow. Remember, the brow follows that rhythm of the glabella. So I will put that brow, just kind of rough it in here, and rhythmically trace my brow line back to this eyebrow. Sorry, when I said brow here, I meant eyebrow. The brow being the forehead, the eyebrow being the growth, the hair growth. Let's go in here, get that change of plane. Remember, the brow changes plane right in here. I'm thinking about that. I can even put a little X to mark that spot. And looking at the reference, that brow comes down for that hollow, which I'm exaggerating here on this caricature. And let's get the upper lid of these eyes. They are kind of slicing the eye a little bit, I'm noticing. So I'm going to play with that shape. We have the tear duct, which is important. Even though this is a caricature, there are certain things you want to make sure that are there. The space for the tear duct being here and the eyeball being there is something that even in a cartoon, I will try my best to include. There are certain things that have to be there, I find, in order for the head to be believable. It doesn't have to be realistic, but it does have to be believable. All right, the septum, we can really see that septum plane, and what I'm going to do, I'm just going to throw this in tone with some massing. And, just for fun, I'll throw this in tone. This whole underplane is going to get some tone. I'm I'm not too worried about the pencil showing through my sketch. After all, this is just a sketch. It's cool if the pencil shows through the watercolor. I like that. Okay, let's continue down with the face here. The cheekbone comes out, and it pretty quickly comes down. Now, I'm exaggerating the kind of squareness of his jaw as it wraps around to the underplane. We get a chin around here somewhere. We're gonna go right back up, and his hair, that wig he's wearing, might not be a well-known fact. He wore a wig for this movie. That's not his actual hair. Just trying to find this jaw here. Okay, so anyway, the hair is going to complete this kind of box. It's a very boxy kind of shape. So his hair is out somewhere out here, and it comes in like that. Okay, his ear is barely visible, but I can trace it. If I traced around the head, I can find the bottom of his ear, which is roughly right in there. And I can go the other way, across the front plane of the cheekbone, down the side plane of the jaw, cross-contouring with my pencil very lightly, and I'll find the other side of the ear, which is invisible, although I noticed that the hair needs to come out a little bit more to cover that ear. So I'll use those construction lines. I'm noticing the hair is a little thin on this side too. So I'll get those construction lines in, and that will help me find the width of certain shapes. All right, let's go in with the mouth here. Now, I'm gonna find this 1, 2, 3 rhythm. Here's the Cupid's bow area, and the lips kind of start right in there, and I'm gonna exaggerate the size of them. Also, because we're looking up in this perspective, the lips are very close to camera, so they are gonna be naturally a little bit bigger. So this is almost an exaggeration of the camera's perspective rather than Samuel L. Jackson's lips themselves, but it will still, hopefully, still read like him. Let's get this dramatic shape. This is the top contour of the upper lip. Let's now find the center line. I'm gonna find that, so this was that Cupid's bow plane. I'm gonna find that same plane as it comes down for the lips. I kind of like to mark a little hard area, landmark for the middle of the mouth. Then let's find the corner of the mouth, which I know that mouth is wrapping around that cylinder, right? So I know that the corner of the mouth is going to be lower than the middle of the mouth because it wraps around the cylinder. So I will use that information, that knowledge, to help me landmark. And the upper lip, I'm going to trace these planes. Sometimes I'm kind of lightly drawing the planes here in my sketch, but when I'm just sketching for fun, like just off camera, I usually don't put those marks in. I just kind of think of them. And, just thinking of them helps me see them on the page, even though they're not physically there. Although now I'm drawing them physically so you can see them. But just so you know, you don't have to always draw these. The sad face rhythm of the chin is there. And we can see the underplane of the chin in this angle. So I'll get that underplane. And this underplane is important. The underplane of the whole jaw, the whole head, I mean. But in this case, that chin is really prominent. And this underplane is important because the chops that he has coming off of his face, the facial hair wraps underneath them. So I'll block those in like this. And then his, what do you call these? Are the chops here? I don't even know what the facial hair is called. These are the chops, right? The sides. This comes up. And, facial hair just grows along the mandible, basically. So I can kind of use my knowledge of the mandible to get this angle. We can't physically see the jawline because it's covered by the hair, but the hair is just like an accentuated sort of jawline. All right, just going back to the ball of the nose, making sure it's got enough width. Get that rhythm a little darker. I'm a little more confident with my strokes now, with my design, so I'm going a little bit darker with my pencil. And again, this is just an HB pencil. I find that I don't need to go through multiple passes. Like I'm not going to take out a B pencil after this and go darker. I'm just going to go straight to watercolor. The watercolor will definitely go over top of this pencil real nice. You'll see. The underside of the head is mostly visible at the chin, and then it kind of wraps up. we see less of it from this angle here. The neck comes down like this. I'm just looking at the photograph. I'm noticing his neck is quite wide. It almost lines up with the jaw. And in a caricature, I mean, I'm choosing what to exaggerate. And this is not an extreme exaggeration. I've based my exaggeration off of one key choice, and that is to widen the eyes. By comparison, I'm also kind of shrinking the nose, and I'm playing with this triangle. Remember the triangle we looked at in the assembly chapter, right? Well, that triangle exists in a caricature. It's just not an equilateral triangle anymore. It's this real wide triangle now. And I find that with a caricature, at least for me, there's so many ways to caricature something and cartoon something. But I try and exaggerate like one key thing and then let the rest kind of fall into line a little bit. There are other artists who go real nuts with caricature. I'm certainly not the world's best caricaturist. That's not what I focus on. But I do enjoy this as an exercise for design. Really good to test your knowledge of the structure of the head. Just starting to indicate the lower eyelid, which from this angle is still visible. Obviously, we're looking more or less directly at it. So I'm just going to indicate this, and I'm going to make his eyes just rounder, like buggier than they are in real life. I'm going to make them more like cartoon eyeballs rather than a realistic structured eye. And let's just get the rest of his facial hair in. So the facial hair around the muzzle seems like it just grows like this, and I'm just using my pencil to stroke in the direction of the plane. So I'm not going this way and that way. I'm going with the direction of the plane. It'll help me keep structured. Then this plane comes down. The other thing I'm trying to do is kind of match sides, because there has to be some symmetry, right? So I'm going to go with this area, with this area. They're mirrors of each other. Come back. Okay, good. Get the chops sort of thing. Really thick, and they progress right up to that hair, which is really a mess of hair. We'll really play with that in the painting phase, which is coming right up. There's going to be a bit of a cast shadow underneath the whole structure here as the light is coming from above. And I will save my shadow pass for the paint. I'm not going to delineate my light and shadows with a pencil, other than what I've already done. I've kind of delineated the underplane of the brow here, the underplane of the nose. You know what? I'll continue a little bit of that delineation, actually, and let's look at the lips. Get that wrapping effect, that upper lip wrapping around, and the lower lip coming out in front, from this angle especially. And let's just put that upper lip in tone here. Okay. Just gonna use some quick cross-hatching to indicate the planes. Remember the 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. I haven't drawn all the planes physically, but they're in my brain, and I'm just indicating them with some cross-hatching. Actually, not cross-hatching, just regular hatching. Cross-hatching is when you go across. Just hatching is when you just keep the same direction. All right, and then, if I wanted to, I could just remind myself that his hair is dark. Oh, there's one key area. That's where the hair right here, the hairline basically, I haven't indicated that. It's a very narrow hairline, like the front planes of the brow are very occluded by the hair. So let's get that. That's a pretty critical part of this Sam Jackson design. So let's get that hairline there, something like this. Not sure if you can see the pencil so clearly at the top of the head. That will become clearer when there's paint on there. Sometimes it's hard to film live sketching. The paper tends to blow out sometimes, but don't worry, you'll see it clearly soon. All right, just kind of marking down the nasolabial furrow, and of course that's one side of it. Let's get the other side, wrapping around just mentally mapping out to see that it meets the sad face rhythm of the chin. And all right, I think that's all for our pencil sketch. Let's move on to some painting. All right, time to start applying some watercolor. So I got my brush. So the first thing I'm going to do is dip into the water and just put it on these watercolors, which have been dried. They came from a tube and they just dried to this palette, to my butcher's tray palette. So I'm just gonna re-wet them. It's a nice thing about watercolors, they're very low maintenance. Like you can have watercolor just on a palette, let it dry. I mean, these watercolors, I don't think I've touched these for probably a week or so. I've been busy on other projects, but they'll just reactivate with water. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put a very light wash on the entire thing, just a warm kind of wash, which will be left behind for the highlights and stuff, the lightest lights. And you probably know that watercolor has to be done from light to dark. So I can't just put in shadows now. Well, I could, but that would be missing an opportunity. I like to go from light to dark. So I'm just going to put this tone very lightly with a lot of water over the whole thing. And if I wanted to, I could even add various temperatures. Like I could get a bit of a blue and add a little bit of blue here at the bottom. Just because there's some facial hair there, I might want a bit of a change of temperature. Might be a little fun to do that. I might get a bit of like, a bit more red for the lips maybe, some cooler alizarin crimson red, maybe for the lips area. Just let that wash itself down. Not too worried. I have my board at a slight angle. It's probably hard to tell on camera. It's like at a 10-degree angle maybe. And while I have these colors on my brush, let's just move them around. This will dry very light. Typically with watercolor, things will dry a bit lighter than you put them down. So I'm putting this down in a way that I know is going to dry a lot lighter. These will be the lightest parts of the painting. So most of what you're seeing here is actually not going to show through in the end. Most of this I will paint over and go darker. But some of this will stay. So a little bit of color variety is okay. And I put the suit in there, which I forgot to do in the drawing phase a moment ago. But the suit will obviously be dark. I'll just block this in, leaving behind pure white for the collar. Just block in that. Okay, let's get the eyeball in with just a little bit of cooler wash. Looks like there's mascara running down his face right now, which is kind of funny, but let's just wash that in. Okay, the wash is dry. You know, I can touch it and just, you know, the paint's not really moving around. So it's time to get some shadow passes in, or a shadow pass. I'll mix up a kind of a warm color. He's got a dark skin tone, and it's, you know, I'm just looking at the photo and it looks like the lights are kind of blowing out to a cooler sort of whitish color, which is what I'm going to leave behind on my sketch. And in comparison, the shadows just look warmer to me. Oftentimes, people with darker skin do have warmer colors in their shadows, just the way that kind of flesh seems to react to light. It's a very common scenario to have like cooler lights, slightly warmer shadows. So I'm mixing up some blues, some oranges and yellows, and just, you know, airing my mixture to warm. I'm not too specific with which colors I'm using. In fact, I don't even know what colors I have on this palette. I'll do my best to describe them, but I think this is like a sky blue color. I think it's literally called sky blue with a bit of cadmium orange, cadmium red, or I think that might be vermilion red. This is like a little bit of I don't even know what that's called, neutral warm lake or something. I don't even know. Watercolors have weird names. That's ultramarine blue, which is always helpful in flesh tones. And this is cobalt turquoise, I think. And this is cobalt blue. So I'll mix them all together. As long as I make sure it's aired on the warm side, which it is, enough water to keep the watercolor flowing, a little more vermilion red in there. And this is alizarin crimson here. Put some of that in. And all right, let's put in some shadow passes. I think what I'll probably start with is this big, plain of the brow. And I'll get this in. If I speak a little bit less, it's just because I'm concentrating. I want to leave behind the eye. And I'm noticing it comes in, and then I got to be careful. The nose is right there, the front plane of the nose. I'll switch up my color a little bit. Let's add a little bit more of whatever that is, that blue. I really don't know what it is, and I don't care what color it is, as long as it's a bit of a cooler color, which will add a bit of a difference with my warm color. So moving that color around, much more important than some kind of technical mixture that you're making. Let's get that brow line coming back, and we'll go around the eye here. If I leave little dots and dashes, I don't care. This is a sketch. And, you know, when I say sketch, you can totally use this approach to paint a final as well. It just depends on how much time you want to spend on it, really. Get some more water on the brush, increase maybe the yellows a little bit. I'm just looking at the photo, and I'm seeing a little bit more of this yellow here. This shadow tracks right down here. And while we're here, let's not neglect the hair, because the hair ties right into those darks. So let's get some of that. And the hair, you can go crazy. Just get all kinds of color down. There's even some hair from my brush on the page, and I don't care. It'll add to it. But while this wash is wet, this is when you can link it with other washes. Remember in the Asaro Head chapter, like when I painted the Asaro Head, I talked about merging shadow shapes and stuff. That's what I'm doing here. And with watercolor, the pressure is on because you have to do it while the wash is wet, or else it will look very jagged and a little off. So while the wash is wet, and that's why I paint with plenty of water on my brush, I'll get this in. I'll link all my shadows together. And I'll get the frayed sort of nature of his hair by letting the brush do its thing on the edge. Just, you can see how I'm moving my brush, right? Okay, get right down into the ear. Let's continue on with some shadow, which comes on the jaw plane, leaving behind the front plane of the cheek. On this side, it's probably right in here. I only get one shot at this with watercolor. It's a bit scary, but watercolor really will train your eye because of this, its unforgiving nature. You will make tons of mistakes, as I have, and those mistakes will cost dearly because you can't really redo it. But in making those errors, and you come back at it again, you don't give up, you come back at it, you will improve in a really meaningful way. Just the risk factor of watercolor is scary, but it really just helps you improve in a really cool way, I think. There's a whole video just to be done on how interesting watercolor is, but I will save that for another time. All right, coming down, this whole area is in shadow. You notice the wash is wet enough that I have a few minutes of working time here. Like, I'm not too concerned with it drying on me. But yeah, let's not flirt with destiny too much here. Let's keep going down, getting the shadow plane in. The entire maxilla plane here is in shadow, and it links with the nose, the septum, the nostril planes. The nose generally has a shadow like that. The upper lip is in shadow. I'll dip into some of the reds a little bit more. Alizarin crimson in this case. The upper lip shadow just defines the shape of that lip, merging all those planes of the lip into one general shadow shape. That little hook at the end for the corner of the mouth. And let's go, I'm losing my momentum here on this side, so let's keep going. Let's add a little blue for no reason other than it might look interesting. Let it bleed over here. And go down. There's this shadow under the lower lip, that little pocket that we looked at, and it's bleeding here. I just wipe that away with my finger or get a paper towel. I don't want it to bleed onto the top of the chin, so I'll just get my paper towel, wipe it away. Looks like some of the board came off with it. No big deal. Some boards are built more sturdy than others. This is actually a pretty good one, but it's a bit old. I pulled it out of my garage. It's been sitting there for like 6 months. It might be a little bit worse for wear because of that. Okay, coming down here for the chin. The chin shadow goes like this. Of course, underneath the head is really dark. Let's get that chin here. Under the chin, cast shadow on the neck. Mix in a few warms and cools. Let watercolor mingle its wet into wet magic. When watercolors are wet, it mixes color for you. It's one of the reasons I love watercolor. It's the most forgiving medium with color, the least forgiving medium with drawing and value. So you definitely get some things for free with watercolor, like beautiful little color mixtures, but you also get other things that you have to work very hard for, like preserving your drawing. So you notice that's why I'm being so careful with this shadow pass here. This is all shadow now. So I'll get that. And you know what, his neck, even though it looks like there's a bit of almost halftone in there, I'm gonna just wash it in softly. The whole neck is a little darker, I think. And I'm gonna really wet down my brush, get a bluer sort of color, and get the facial hair, which seems to me a little bit cooler. Preserving that quality of the planes as it comes down. You know, never forgetting about the planes. Planes are of ultimate importance. Let's go a bit deeper with the that shadow under the chin, under the lower lip, sorry. Okay. Gonna mix up some kind of bluer tone just because I feel like the whole head is mostly warms here. I'm just gonna go a little bit darker with that hair because the hair is the darkest local value in this picture. It's black hair, right? And hair is a very absorbent material. It does not release a lot of reflected light, so it tends to go quite dark. So I'm just gonna get a darkish value and just throw some strokes in there just to darken it up. Look at my mixing. Like, look at this. Like, please don't think that I'm thinking about color. I'm not. It's value I'm thinking about. The only thing I'm thinking about with color is getting variety in there. And even that is not a rule. You don't need variety. I think variety looks nice. And experimenting with all kinds of mixtures. And watercolor, again, the reason I love watercolor, and this can support a whole other video, is watercolor, its mixtures are so spastic and impromptu and unpredictable. I love just throwing different colors together with watercolor and just seeing what they do. And then, that can inform me later if I'm doing something more controlled, like a digital painting or an oil painting or something. I can learn from what watercolor has taught me, in terms of how it mixes its pigments together. I want to remember this overall funnel shape of the head. Remember, it's got this slight diagonal to it. I want to emphasize that. I'm losing that in my wash here. So I want to emphasize that pattern. Same with this side of the head. Make sure you get that. That's a big part of the human head design. Okay. The eyes are probably dry. The area around the eyes are probably dry. So I'm going to get some redder pigment and a little bit more pigment on the brush than I had before. And just, let's get some slightly darker passages here. It will, and let's get the irises in as well, which I'll do in a moment, but I just want to get the upper eyelid, which is a pretty dramatic piece of shadow. Let's get that in. Just to set off the eye a little bit. Okay, watering down the brush, wetting down the brush, dipping into some colors that are there. You can see the tilt of my board. You can see the water running down the palette. Maybe you can get a sense of how my board is tilted just a little bit. You don't need a tilt, but I find that having water run down the page a little bit is actually nice. Don't know why. It's nice. I just like it. Some watercolorists prefer their page totally flat. Others like a dramatic tilt. I like something closer to flat, but still with a tilt. All right, he's looking up, obviously, so let's get these. The circular irises are becoming ellipses as he's looking up. The eye is rotating, right? So that circle becomes an ellipse. All right, at this point, I'm going to stop, let everything dry, and we will move on from here.